Welcome back to Wool Shift Dust. I'm Elysia, here with Luke to walk you through all the murderous machinations of this episode of Silo. We had to wait 2 extra days for episode 4 of season 2, titled The Harmonium. But Luke, I guess it was worth the wait?
Well, no, correctly, Elysia. The audience had to wait an extra 2 days, but we've got
don't rub it in. Don't rub it
in. Also, I've got a bit of a cold, listeners, so if I sound like Barry White's non-musical English cousin, I apologize.
So James Corden. No, I'm just kidding. I actually think he can sing nicely. But so, Luke, can you remind people before we get into the episode, what is our book spoiler policy?
Okay, so Elysia has read all the books that go to comprise the series Silo. I have read none of them, so I am the fountain of all ignorance. But we will be discussing things that happen in the book if they've already happened on screen, either in season 1 or in the first 4 episodes of season 2.
Yes. So Luke's representing the non-readers of you out there in the audience, so we will make sure to protect you all from unnecessary book spoilers. But of course, we are about to now jump into spoilers for everything that's aired on television up to and through episode 4. For those of you who do want more book spoilers, those are saved for the book club spoiler casts, which are released each week after this episode. And this week's topic will be shadowing the head of IT, because that's a story point that looms large after this week's events. I'll talk about the book club more at the end. So episode 4 of season 2, The Harmonium, this aired, we're back on Fridays, so this airs December 6th, 2024. Viewers at home had to wait 2 extra days because of the early episode last week. The writer of this episode was Sal Calleros. He is an EP this season, known for shows like Snowfall and The Good Place, and The Good Doctor and Sneaky Pete. And the director, this is the first episode of the season not directed by Michael Dinner. This one was directed by Arik Avellino, who's a fresher face in the industry. The title, obviously, refers to the instrument that Solo plays in this episode, which Juliet is about to destroy, which Juliet destroys. That instrument, by the way, it's not in the books, the harmonium, but it is a real instrument in the real world. Like, it's called a pump organ also, or a reed organ, and basically it generates sound by pushing air over these like vibrating thin pieces of metal in a frame that are called reeds. Have you heard of this instrument before?
Yeah, my uncle plays the harmonium.
Oh, really?
Or he used to anyway.
Oh, cool.
In church.
Okay. Yeah, it does have that organ sound because of the air, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose the chapel in the village I grew up wasn't really big enough to have a full organ, so it had a harmonium instead.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So were you Leo pointing meme when you saw it?
I was a little bit Leo pointing meme when I saw it.
What were your overall thoughts on this episode?
Okay, this is going to take a minute because I have complicated thoughts on this episode, because there was stuff in here that I really, really liked.
Mm-hmm.
Really liked. Love the stuff with Juliet and Solo. Love the stuff with Meadows and Bernard. But there's also stuff in here that I was not so keen on.
Okay.
The whole episode felt a little bit rushed. Like, I wanted another episode of building tension between the down deep and the up top of the silo. It felt like things are coming to a head a bit too quickly. And like, one of the things I like about Silo is that it's usually quite subtle in its storytelling. This felt very blunt. This felt very, this is the plot. I am telling you the plot in big, bold, capital letters. And also, and I'm sorry, hopefully this will be the last time I bring this up, but what they are doing with Walker's agoraphobia really...
Agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is a fear of sexual assault. Okay. Agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia. What they're doing with Walker's agoraphobia really pisses me off.
Okay.
Because it's one of the least helpful tropes around illness, disability, mental illness, just welfare in general, that you can logic yourself out of feeling the way that you feel. That Walker could sort of decide not to be
Mhm.
agoraphobic anymore.
Mhm.
And like, I'm not agoraphobic. I don't know anybody that is. But, I have my own problems to deal with. And in my line of work, I have to deal with, a wide variety of mental illness, problems that students bring to me and trying to help them manage that. And one of the least helpful things you can do is like suggest if you tried not feeling that way.
Mhm. Mm.
And that conversation between Walker and Gloria really, really annoyed me, and it kind of spoiled the episode, particularly when you could have done it a completely different way. The way I would have done it is, I'm still scared spitless, and like every
Mhm.
moment I'm out here
Yeah.
is a struggle for me, but I'm gonna do it because Juliet needs me, and the people in the down deep need me,
Mhm.
and only I can do this.
Mhm.
And that would have been so much more constructive than the way they did it.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry to like keep harping on about that, but for a show that actually is very good on inclusivity and dealing with the world as it is,
Mhm.
that was a really bad misstep, and it really pissed me off.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely understand that. For me, yeah, I expressed my frustration with that story point in the past. It's still there, but I kind of decided like, okay, I was frustrated with that and I moved on. My biggest point of frustration right now, and I have to say I love this episode. It's my favorite so far, but it does rub me the wrong way. Just in the way we started to talk about this with last week's episode, with how they're setting up like, oh, well, the plan says always blame it on mechanical and smack down on them. But first of all, I don't completely understand how that is effective. And sometimes it just feels like really on the nose. Like, it's scarier when the leaders are killing people in like an insidious behind closed curtains way, not when they are like, mob, here is your pitchforks, attack, attack, you know?
Yeah, I think on the nose is the same. I think we're on the same page there, because that's what I meant when when I said the storytelling was kind of blunt. On the nose is
Yeah,
probably a
yeah.
better way of putting it. Yeah.
But, on the agoraphobia front, I yeah, completely agree, that's still the case with Martha, but I do have to say they handled that much better with Solo in this episode.
Yes,
Like,
they do. Yes,
they
they
did
do.
give that proper attention to, and then basically what Solo's going through is something similar, probably worse, because of his circumstances have been worse for the past however many years. But it's not dissimilar to what we should have been seeing from Walker.
Yeah, and that makes what they're doing with Walker even more confusing, because they obviously can integrate this into the story. They're just
Mhm.
not doing that. And there's a lot of stuff to like in this episode. I love the stuff with Juliet and Solo. I love the stuff with Bernard and Judge Meadows. I also love the stuff with Billings and Down Deep Deputy Hank. Like, Down Deep Deputy Hank, you kind of see him as just this dog's body going around doing whatever Judicial says, but I think actually this episode showed him being a serious policeman, showed him being a serious
Mhm.
police officer, showed him as being quite a dedicated cop, which I thought was an
Mhm.
interesting thing to do with Hank's character. Gave him, fleshed him out a bit.
Yeah, well, I've always thought I'm team Hank. I honestly think he deserves to be on the Juliet end of the scale even more than her, but yeah, I think that he has shown that he's trying to do his job, but also in a way that's reasonable. Like he's like, I want to keep order in the down deep, but I'm not going to go reporting people for saying they want to go outside when I understand where this is coming from.
Yeah.
He's
And
just
I
reasonable.
love the line. They gave me that judicial look, that judicial look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, with I was with Holston Jr. Billings, remember?
yeah,
Anyway, because Billings was called both Holston Jr. and Judicial Face by Patrick Kennedy last season.
yeah.
and Billings is like, oh, I know that well.
I know that look. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Patrick, Patrick lives?
We possibly Patrick lives question
I
mark?
mean, okay, so I should have gone with my first instincts because I don't even know if I said it in the recording yet because I
You
haven't
did.
edited it yet, but he was shot in the shoulder.
Yeah,
But then
you mean for our episode 3 episode.
mhm,
You
mhm.
did say it. I
That I
remember you
think,
saying it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that he was shot in the shoulder, and I had doubts, yeah. But then, it was just Hank was convinced that he was dead. So I was like, oh, well, I guess, Hank must have inspected the body, but now we find out maybe not. He was just like, oh, I assumed he was dead. Um, so yeah, interesting. So where and when do you think Patrick will turn up next?
I'm not sure. You see, I'm not convinced he is alive. I'm gonna need to see him on screen before I think he is alive.
Okay.
Because I think it's just as likely that Judicial recovered the body to dispose of it. So
And then they took Cooper's
I'm
body
unsure.
too. I don't understand why they took Cooper's body. I don't know what they could want that for.
No, I don't understand why they took Coop's body.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll find out. We'll find out. We'll put a pin
Yeah.
in that. I do think know where Danny is, though.
Oh, go
Um,
on.
I feel like Danny. So, yeah, obviously, last episode, Bernard was glad to hear that they still had Patrick and Danny. And that they hadn't been given the forgetting drug yet. And so we saw Sims go to Patrick, but I have a feeling at that same time, Bernard went to Danny and said, listen, you have to fix this disk for me from this. You have to see what data you can recover from this disk from the smashed hard drive because now Bernard desperately wants to know what's on the hard drive.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
So that's where I think Danny is. I think we'll see him trying to recover because he was the better hacker between him and Patrick for sure.
And like on a scale of 1 to 10, how pleased were you when Lucas? How hard did you squeak when Lucas
Oh,
showed
was
up?
yeah, yeah. So when people watch this live, they'll have seen a previously on, and I assume he'll pop up there, and people will be excited for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, we finally have visual confirmation of Lucas. Not only his name is set, like when they first said like, oh, and Judge Meadows has a meeting with him, I'm like, yes, and we actually get to see
So
him. Yeah. So panicked book readers can stop worrying that he's dead for some reason. This was the latest theories in the book chat around the time we're recording was that he might be dead in the mine somewhere. Like, you can't just kill him off. He hasn't had his story yet. Anyway, so after this episode, where are Sims and Nard on the Sims Nard scale for you right
yeah, you
now?
see, this is the thing. I think we're gonna have to call it the Juliet to Bernard scale because I think there is
Yeah.
now a differentiation between Sims and Bernard. Because like Bernard is right off the end of the scale. Like he can't even see the end of the scale. The scale is a dot to him right now.
Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
that was properly evil. That was sociopathic.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was getting really into Mary Meadows' character. I'm sad
Yeah,
to see her go.
and clearly she was the love of Bernard's life.
I think so.
Yeah,
And
and
he of
he of
hers.
hers as well.
Yeah. I mean, that was some proper silo level tragedy. Yeah.
It was.
So yeah, we're gonna get into that, of course. But let me ask. I keep checking in on where's Solo for you now on the Juliet to Bernard scale.
Yeah, we see. You're even more evil than Sims now, Bernard. You're right off on your own. Solo, I'd say if Juliet's a 1 and Bernard is a 10, I would say that Solo is a 3 right now.
Okay. Okay.
Because he's been helpful. He's going through some stuff. You know, he's been on his own for a long time. We're not sure quite how long, but a period of decades, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk through this episode one arc at a time, and we are going to first start with Juliet and Solo in Silo 17, and then we'll switch over to everything going on in Silo 18. So we're going to be talking about events in a somewhat different order than the TV episode. But it is time for
Your regularly scheduled breakdown will begin in 3, 2, 1.
So that was a beautiful opening, right? With Solo talking about his imaginary circus.
Yeah, you know who Solo reminded me of throughout this entire episode? I have a 5-year-old nephew, called Archie, and he really reminded me of Archie. And like Steve Zahn does this really unusual performance of a guy that's kind of childlike, but also a little bit sinister, but also really knows what's going on. Like, it's Solo that comes up with the idea of the harmonium. And it's this really, I'm saying odd, but I don't mean bad. I just mean unusual performance
Eccentric, yeah.
that Steve Zahn is giving, and he absolutely sells it.
Yeah, no, I have to say, I think he's nailing the character from the books pretty well. But this was like, as soon as I heard the casting, I'm like, yes, that's
Yeah,
that
that makes
character.
sense.
So, as Juliet, Rebecca Ferguson, and Solo, Steve Zahn, explore the abandoned Silo 17, her searching for the materials she needs to create a suit to walk outside to her silo and or an air pump to allow her to dive into the flooded level 23 to get more materials she needs. Solo regales her with stories about the world before, especially his favorites, circuses with trapeze artists and elephants. I mean, I guess an elephant does sound scary if you don't know what they are.
Yeah, I mean, under the wrong circumstances, elephants can be scary.
Oh, sure.
You don't want to mess with them. But yeah, like, and also like the idea of they have teeth that grow out the side of their. That's kind of right, but not
and long
really.
noses.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to note that Solo likes elephants, he says, because they are smart and altruistic. So these are apparently the qualities that he values. So it
Yeah.
seems no wonder he's taken to Juliet.
Yeah.
How do you think Solo knows about birds and circuses and elephants and
I'm
all that?
assuming I'm assuming like most, if not all, of the relics in Silo 17 he are like stored in that vault were basically given to him when he was locked in there to try and keep him occupied and trying to stop him from like completely unspooling.
Okay. He also said, oh yeah, no, so he starts to explain an ocean to Juliet, and she's like, I know what an ocean is. I've seen it in a book. And this was a really telling exchange. He's like, they let you read books in 18? She's like, no. He's like, oh man. Well, anyway. But yeah, so yeah, they are not allowed to read. He knows they're not allowed to read in his silo, but obviously he has. Do you think Solo knows what a Pez dispenser is?
Interesting question.
If Bernard knows, then
If Bernard,
and they have access, yeah,
maybe,
maybe he has one in that room.
possibly, yeah. Maybe they came as a set.
Yeah,
maybe there's a matching set. Yeah,
of 50.
Yeah,
one for each silo. So yeah, Juliet throughout this, she's treating him like an annoying kid brother, not really taking him seriously. It is interesting. A difference from the book I just want to point out is that Solo, it seems like the TV Solo was more isolated before Juliet came, whereas in the book Solo, he was out a bit more before Juliet came. So he was doing his own, he called them projects, and that was kind of like a way to, give him a purpose, to keep him sane, do something.
Oh, so he was kind of wandering around Silo 17 a little bit.
Yeah, he was. So he knew where some things were, not just because, I don't know, it seems like this Solo just has that memorized. So when Juliet shows up and she's like, oh, I need help with doing similar stuff to what we see her doing in the show, he's like, oh, project. Okay, project. But of course, it's also about companionship in both cases. So Juliet's project right now is she needs a way to push air through 50 feet of tubing so she can breathe underwater. And Solo is like trying to tell her things. Like he's like, oh, hey, they used to breathe through machines in the before times. And if she had been paying attention, she might have wanted to ask, like, how do you know this? What else do you know? Where is this information?
Yeah, I'm gonna say either Graham Yost or Hugh Howey or one of the writers, they have a real soft spot for like early 20th century literature, because we've had we've had the Wizard of Oz, we've had 20,000 League Under the Sea.
Yeah. No, that's a show edition. These specific pieces of media from our world.
Okay.
other than Romeo and Juliet, of course, because that's where she got her name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he mentions 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. So yeah, more classic lit indeed. And and he says that Juliet is like Captain Nemo, which for anyone who doesn't know the story, Captain Nemo he's a mysterious scientific visionary, speaks many languages, he's an explorer of the seafloor, of course. So somewhere no one else has gone before. He's very loyal. These are all these positive qualities, but he also has a hunger for vengeance and hates imperialism. So, all in all, this is a compliment, but it also tells us that Solo is observing Julia pretty well and might be, like, better observer of humans than we would initially suspect. But Juliet, totally too consumed in her project to actually even listen to him.
Yeah, and it's like, you can tell Solo isn't used to having a conversation because he's not quite sure how to like pitch. Pay attention to me, I'm trying to tell you something.
Right. Yeah. If he got to the point faster, then he might have gotten her
Yes.
attention
Yeah.
more. But he's like, no, well, wait, there's this instrument. She's like, okay, great, an
Okay.
instrument. um, but yeah, so Solo, he suggests the harmonium at this point, but again, she's just like not interested in listening to him and considering that he might be smarter than she thinks he is at this point. Um, and I do have to sympathize with her a little bit that, of course, we as viewers, we're like, oh, he clearly knows things. He's talking about things in our real world that are actually true. But she doesn't know that. To her, all the things he's saying about elephants and scuba suits and submarines and all that, that sounds like nonsense, I'm sure. Like made up crap.
Well, does it? Because like Juliet has seen the Georgia tourist book. I mean, obviously not everything Solo's referring to is in there, but she is aware that some of the stuff he's saying, because she tells her about oceans, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she's just too distracted to pick up on the fact that he does
Yeah.
know what he's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. The oceans part should tip her off. Juliet she's not a perfect person, which is why I'm reluctant to put her on one end of the scale. But she means well, but she's so caught up in herself and what she's worried about at this moment that she doesn't realize that the person she's with actually could help her. And I think there's probably a lot of people at home like nodding, like, oh yeah, that's a thing that people do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, at this moment, she's like, I just need something to write on, something, she wants something to help her think against the backdrop of Solo's incessant yapping. And she's like, I need a piece of slate or something. And he's like, oh, problem solved. There's a chalkboard in that same room as the harmonium I keep talking about. And she's like, okay, great. Let's go to that room then. So Solo leads her to a classroom where indeed there's a chalkboard, and Juliet erases the lists of numbers written on it and begins drawing her own designs, while Solo looks around the classroom with a nostalgic look on his face. It's a time capsule from the day Timmy's dad led everyone outside that we saw at the beginning of episode 1. This was 1 week before their local holiday, Founders Day, and the classroom decorations are set up for that. We also see colorful backpacks hanging from the wall, and there's a blue backpack holding a blue sweater that reminds Solo of someone named Lapis, who used to sit next to him in class. And he remembers specific things about her, that she made him laugh, her mom jarred peach preserves, her name meant blue. But Juliet points out that they're in a level B classroom, so for 11 or 12-year-olds. So this clearly couldn't have been the Lapis who sat next to Solo, if the owner of this backpack was that age at the time of the rebellion. And Solo clarifies he said it just reminded him of Lapis. And then Juliet asks him about his eye, as one is lighter in color than the other, and he says he doesn't like to talk about it. So, okay, as a book reader, I have no idea what the eye thing is about, but I'm glad to hear there's a reason for this heterochromia change that they added to the character. I'm curious to find out what it is. But Luke, what do you make of the stuff that Solo's saying in this scene?
Well, okay, I had an idea about the numbers on the chalkboard.
Hmm.
Were they the attempts of the two guys whose bodies we see outside the vault to try and figure out the passcode for, because Solo says later in the episode you can only tap 3
Mhm.
times or you
Mhm.
get locked out. So I wonder whether these were the guys from whose corpses we see trying to work out what that code was. Because if you look, all the string of numbers, they all seem to be 6-digit
Mhm.
sequences.
That was my thinking exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then Solo says, "Erase them. I don't think anyone will mind." And he's thinking like, first of all, if that's the case, then it's like, okay, nobody's going to mind because presumably it's implied that he killed those people. And also, I imagine, he's like, let's get rid of this evidence of someone trying to work out my code and all the things they eliminated.
yeah,
So I'm not sure. Solo says he has no idea what it is. I'm not sure I believe him that he has no idea what it is. I think he
yeah.
does.
No, I thought Juliet questioning Solo about his age was interesting,
Mhm.
because yeah, obviously he wouldn't have been in the school when people went outside, but he seemed like uncomfortable like answering the question. Maybe that's just Solo being a Solo, but it seemed like, yeah, he wasn't telling the entire truth there somehow.
Yeah, well, he told her, just to remind people, in episode 3, yeah, last episode, that he was the shadow of the head of IT, and that's why he was in that bunker. Um so if that's the case, then that implies that he was not 11 or 12 years old. But I wanna point out that he he has some, like, he acts very childlike, as you say, and he says some cute things, like, he says during this when he's talking about Lapis, he's like, "She said that her name meant blue or something, but I think that she only said that because it was her favorite color, and she liked my blue eyes." Just the way he pronounced favorite, which was
Yeah.
not in the subtitles. Apple, do better. It's interesting though that different silos have different holidays. We have Founders Day versus Freedom Day. And we also see, like, did you notice differences in the production design between silos 18 and 17?
Yeah, they're subtle, but they are there.
Yeah, like what do you see?
Um, just like, yeah, that the color. I mean, it's kind of difficult to tell because the lighting's really low, but the
Mm.
color palette seems
Mm-hmm.
different. Like the silo seems, again, this could just be a trick of the light, but the silo seems marginally narrower.
Oh. Um, I mean, yeah, for me, I think that the silo itself looks the same to me, but then the way they decorate their apartments or those backpacks we saw in the
Yeah,
classroom, things like that, it looks like to me a bit more colorfully kitschy, which we saw, like Gloria was a bit like that, but this is like Gloria everywhere all over Silo 17.
we haven't seen a school in Silo 18, have we?
No, but like just like the apartment where Juliet's staying is very retro kitschy.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, it is. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it just seems like there's more colorful, more busy decorations around.
Bit more 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Mhm.
bit more 70s retro going on in Silo 17.
So just to shout out again, the production designer, his name's Gavin. I never understand. Is it Bouquet or Bouquet? But anyway, his background isn't especially Star Wars or Lucasfilm stuff. But yeah, doing a great job on the show. We talked a lot more about it last season. So, in the classroom, Solo spots the harmonium. The reason he wanted to bring Juliet to this classroom in the first place, he plays it, it seems like another boyish impulse to Juliet, though he actually can play. And everything he does, though, is currently annoying Juliet, and this is no exception, until he forces Juliet to come look at the instrument, showing her the reason he brought her to see it. It's operated with a bellows, and one that seems to produce enough force to pump air through 50 feet of tubing. So Juliet tells Solo she will have to dismantle the instrument to use it, and she's not sure whether or not she'll be able to put it back together. So Solo plays one last time. So this is my question. Do you ever, like, if the rebellion happened at least 25 years ago because Bernard told Meadows that it happened before she was his shadow. So he would have been, he says he was in that bunker for 25 years. Like, he didn't seem 25 years rusty on the harmonium. Do you think it's possible he ever snuck up here to play it?
Maybe, maybe. I mean, if he left the bunker on occasion, it would answer like a load of questions, like where is he getting this constant supply of chicken stew from? You know, where is he sleep? You know, when you know, has he bought a bed back
Mm,
to the bunker? Stuff like that. So yeah, I think the room is simply not large enough to contain everything he would need. So
mm-hmm.
I think just for the purposes of staying alive, he would have had to have left that bunker periodically.
Yeah. But do you think Juliet's going to take Solo more seriously now?
She should. I'm not
She
sure that she
should.
will, but she should.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like he was the one being patient this episode. Like, he's trying to solve her problems for her, and she just like won't fucking listen.
Yeah.
She's acting like he's annoying. Like, oh, I was so frustrated on his behalf.
Yeah.
So Juliet makes her air pump with Solo's help, but he's starting to get that feeling like he didn't lock his vault, though Juliet promises she saw him do it. He wants to go back and check, but Juliet talks him down so he can help her with her mini dive to level 23. He's just got to keep pumping as long as she's underwater. So yeah, this reminded me of like, I definitely have had that feeling before where I leave the house and I take a mental snapshot that I've locked the front door, and then I'll get halfway to my destination and I'll be like, "Oh my god, I did it," right? And it comes back to trauma because I did have a break-in at my house. So, yeah, it just makes me double worried about it, and I can only imagine with Solo, he has someone writing on the walls, "We will get in there." They have all these codes they've obviously been trying every day, like, oh my god, the
Yeah.
anxiety.
So yeah, I mean, I think we've all had that. So yeah,
Mhm.
have you locked the front door? My personal variation of that is, have I turned the charger for the chair off?
Mm.
Because like obviously I plug the chair in at night, but there's a charger that
Mhm.
turns it from, I don't know, one kind of electric current to another kind of electric current.
Mhm.
And I'm always slightly paranoid that I haven't turned it off at the wall because it gets quite hot.
Mm.
So I like had it drilled into me. I don't actually think it is a fire risk. I think
Right.
this is just one of those things your parents tell you
Right.
to get you to turn it off.
Just in
But
case.
yeah, just in case.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sure we can imagine that anxiety, and then just, yeah, Solo amped up to 11 because he was confronted with it daily, presumptively, for who knows
Yeah,
how long.
and like for me, at least once I've texted my neighbour to come
Oh,
into my
yeah?
house to check because
Uh-huh.
yeah, I was so certain that I hadn't turned it off.
Yeah. Yeah. Can be the oven or, and yeah, and here, Solo calls Juliet Captain Nemo again because, of course, she's going under the water, but, of course, she doesn't get it. So Juliet made she takes a big piece of metal that looks like the base of a pole or a column or something, and she uses it as an anchor to drag her down one level. And breathing through the tube, Solo is pumping air into. She jumps down to the landing below 23. But the breathing hose only reaches so far, so she takes one final breath and leaves it behind. But the rope on the anchor is also restricting her as she tries to climb up to the level 23 landing where there's air. She's running out of breath, so she breaks off a scrap of rusted metal from the landing she's trying to get onto, and she saws the rope tied to her waist off so that she can pull herself up onto 23, which is full of trapped air she can breathe. And meanwhile, Solo is still pumping air through the hose, not realizing she's no longer using it. And Juliet is punching, kicking, and peeling back the doors on lockers to find what she's looking for. So yeah, Juliet in those lockers, that looked so painful. I mean,
Yeah, there had to be a better way of doing that. That looked like it really hurt.
yeah, like her elbows and her fists, and she's way stronger than I am.
Yeah, like you can tell this. Rebecca Ferguson, all muscle and she's all muscle
Yeah.
and sinew. It's
Yeah.
really quite impressive. It's impressive and a little bit depressing, to be honest. Because I'm
Why
the same
depressing?
age as Rebecca Ferguson,
Oh, yeah,
so
well,
if
I
she can
wouldn't.
do that, why
Yeah.
can't I?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I wanna be that strong, but,
That's true.
I guess Juliet, in her world, that's she's been working on, the generator for how long?
Yeah,
So Solo's getting more and more nervous. He's worried about leaving his vault unattended. So as soon as as soon as Juliet pops back up from the water, he tells her he has to go and runs back to the vault in a panic and out of breath, Juliet following. And the vault is still locked, as Juliet said it would be, but Solo wants to go back in for a while. Only in his panic, he enters the wrong code twice. And Juliet tries to talk him down, but now he's panicked that if he enters the wrong code again, he'll be locked out and he starts blaming Juliet for changing the code behind his back or something. Luckily, third time's the charm, and he retreats inside his safe space. And Juliet says she thought they were past this. So, I mean, so Juliet's frustrated with him, but yeah, as we said before, I think this is like the more realistic reaction, especially if it
it
is his
is.
first time out in 25 years.
It is.
He's been out a while in one go.
I love the way that Steve Zahn, like he's when he puts the code in for the third time, he very briefly closes his eyes and does sort of
Yeah.
actually goes through the physical motion of these are the keys I push and this is the order in which I push them.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
actually
So
like miming that. I realize it's a podcast and you can't see what I'm doing.
I mean, so if he has not been out of of the vault, then he hasn't been entering the code because he wouldn't need to, and that would
No,
make sense to forget it. But if he does have the physical memory of it, that kind of implies that maybe he has been going out time to time.
like I say, I think he would have to. He would just that space is not large enough to contain everything you would need.
Well, we don't know what all's in the space.
It's true.
And we do know that we saw when in the other version that there seemed to be drawers, all those things, all those like kind of steps along the
Yeah, that's
walls and
true.
stuff. They had handles in them, so they seem to be drawers. But that doesn't solve the sleeping situation or something. So I don't know. I'm waiting for a better look. But like I said, unlike Walker and the whole Meadows quitting alcohol thing, we see that Solo is not immediately cured the moment he has a breakthrough by leaving the bunker. So I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
And we get that important piece of information that the door locks if you enter the wrong code 3 times. I'll just say in the book, the door locks for 24 hours if you enter the wrong code 3 times. So I don't know if it's the same in the show, but
Oh, it's like that. It's like that thing. It's like that thing. If you enter the code on your phone too quickly and you don't do it properly, it'll lock you out for like 20 minutes. You can try again.
yeah, 24 hours would be a lot for my phone.
Yeah, it would. It would.
Yeah. Solo did not like the suggestion he should write the code down. I think that must come from some fear also related to this whole situation. He even blames Juliet saying that she changed the code somehow, even though she was with him the whole time. But I'm like, Juliet only just learned that keypad locks existed.
Well, yeah. Presumably, if you write it down, somebody could find it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So Juliet tells Solo that while she was sent out to clean, part of her was relieved it was over. She was so tired, and when she got outside, she was scared and lonely. She thought every step would be her last, but she just kept walking. She understands how Solo feels, she says. She tries to lull Solo into talking to her again, calling herself Captain Nemo, asking about the circus and the things with the long noses. And when Solo doesn't respond, she gets up to walk away. But Solo doesn't want that. So he needs her to know that those animals with the long noses are called elephants and lions also existed. And that's the end of their story.
I do. I do like the description of lions as just big cats, which I suppose they are, but I never
Yeah.
think you never really think of lions as big cats.
I think of my cats as little lions. So, any more thoughts on the Juliet and Solo side of the story this week?
I'd like to for Juliet to make some progress on her suit. Like
Okay.
the constant MacGyvering. I'm not saying Like, it's not getting wearing at the moment, but like, if it keeps going, if it's like, if it becomes like challenge of the week, that's gonna get a little bit boring, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to know more about Solo's backstory, but yeah.
Yeah. And I still want to know who those corpses belong to.
That's
Yeah.
gonna be part of the backstory. Okay, well, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna check in on the other silo, see what's going on over there. See you in a sec. Okay, so we pick up in Silo 18 with Knox, Shane McRae, and Shirley, Remy Milner. They're standing in front of the wall of names in the digger room that Knox teased us about at the end of last week's episode. And he's figured out that the names are not just from a single rebellion 140 years ago, the one they keep talking about, the one they kept talking about last season, but the names are actually from a series of rebellions. They wrote the triggers for the rebellions down along with those with the presumably names they were memorializing, and it seems that a common thread through these different rebellions was that the blame was pinned on mechanical. So, yeah, this wall of names is a new TV thing. I do think other silos might have done similar.
Yeah. And also, like, I find it hard to believe that Knox is the first person who's worked this out. Like, there may not be many people that have gone down there, but Knox was not the first.
I mean, you mean in the last 140 years, because clearly before that, they were using
Yeah.
this as a system of
Yeah.
sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe Knox is the only first one to act on it. Is Noxy Foxy, because he does redeem himself a lot in this episode.
Oh yeah, he's getting back into foxy territory.
Yeah.
Well, he's running like a fox at the end, but
He really is, but we'll get to that.
yeah. But he says at this point there's a rebellion every generation. And I guess the strategy is always mechanical as a scapegoat. I mean, I've harped on this. We talked about it. I'm not convinced about this as like a strategy for that they get out of the order. Like, I still don't understand how pitting everyone against the people who run the silos electricity benefits them, and then they crush them, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, no, I don't. The only way it makes sense to me is what we were discussing last episode. If this is some kind of massive psychological experiment done by some outside force, then it makes a certain amount of sense. But I think that's the only context I can think of where it makes sense.
Yeah, no political scientists there in the writing room. I mean,
No.
it's different in the book. I don't like the book, but anyway, sorry, I will stop with that. I'll stop with that. Because normally I welcome book changes. Right?
Yeah, but it has to make sense. It has to fit the overall logic of the story.
Yeah. And they haven't, it's also, they brought up this season where Juliet said the reason why they clean the lenses in this, and it's a different reason in the book. I've harped upon it in the past. I won't harp on it now, but it's like, well, if you're going to change it from the reason in the book, at least make it better. And I don't think you did. But
yeah,
for the most part, I love the writing on this show. It's just these things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe there is a twist that we haven't seen coming that makes it all add up.
Yeah. And of course, I have to like a show a certain amount to care about details like this.
Yes, exactly.
They've created a world where I want it to live up to the realism, the psychological and political realism that they have painted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so after the death of Cooper last week, Knox is getting closer to the point where he will agree with Shirley to shut down the generator room, shut off the silo. But he wants to try one more time to do things the right way, to go straight to the people in power and demand the truth to their faces. He says he'll set up a meeting with Bernard, Tim Robbins, who's the acting mayor still, which he can do as head of mechanical. And he says he'll bring along Shirley, he'll bring along Martha, Harriet Walter, and also he'll bring along Carla McLean, played by Claire Perkins, because she is the head of supply. And they'll set up a meeting to request the right to use this quote unquote miraculous, allegedly new good tape to go outside and explore a little around the silo. Shirley agrees to this plan, but she thinks they should go to Judge Meadows, played by Tanya Moody, instead. They know by now that the real power lies with Bernard, not Meadows, but the rest of the silo doesn't know that, so they shouldn't let on that they do either.
Yeah, I thought this was one of the most interesting bits of the episode because actually this is really cunning on Shirley's part. This is a level of cunning I didn't think Shirley had. Let's make them see if they will honor the pact. If there is this set of rules that we're all supposed to be following, let's try and force them to follow it. And if they don't, it then reveals who actually has power and who doesn't. So I thought that was quite cool. But I like because like sending out explorers is like the logical consequence of what Bernard said in that speech. Like somebody was going to make that demand. If it wasn't mechanical, it almost follows axiomatically that if you've got this good tape, well, why not go outside and have a bit of a look around and see what you can find?
Yeah.
Even if it's only for a couple of minutes. So actually, it was Bernard's speech that created that almost inevitably. And this is where like automatically following the order makes no sense.
Right.
But Bernard's speech has already created a situation that the order really does not anticipate at all. Like you can't just mechanically follow what's in this book because there are just too many contingencies.
Mary Meadows understands that, but Bernard does not.
Yes.
Yeah. I just think it's very interesting and thought-provoking what Shirley says. Knox is like, we won't be armed, we'll be peaceful. And Shirley says, still, every step we take will be considered an act of aggression. And we see that's true throughout, just because they've been painted as the bad guys, as the scapegoats, mechanical. People are going to, everything that they do, they're going to interpret it as sinister.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They don't come up to the mids. They don't come up to the up top, with very rare exceptions. The only people that seem to like move from one end of the silo to the other, and even they don't do it often, are sheriffs and judicial, and like the Mayor Johns in season 1 was doing like the silo equivalent of a royal progress through the silo, and that was a big event. So people don't, as a rule, move more than a few levels in either direction.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
No elevators. Illegal in the pact. So one other thing I just want to point out is that I think this might be the first time we officially get Carla's last name, but it is McLean, he says here. And I thought, Carla might be McLean, who's a character who becomes an important character in the second half of Wool, which is the part of the book that is, that is analogous with this season of television. So It's just, McLean is the head of supply in the book. It makes sense. Yes, Carla is officially McLean, the head of supply in the in the book. And so in the book, though, Walker. Well, first of all, Walker doesn't just suddenly start like running all over the silo as soon as he walks out the door the first time.
Sorry, we don't mean to harp on this, but it's just.
But one thing I do like that they added this past romantic relationship between Walker and McLean. This is not in the book. Those two characters did not have a past romantic relationship that's talked about, at least.
And also the two actors sell it really well.
Yeah.
They really do sell it really well.
But as my one book excerpt for this episode, I wanted to just read about the first time Knox meets, or McLean. Well, it's not the first time they've ever met, but it's when they are going up the silo for not the same reasons, but similar enough reasons to what we see in this episode. And Walker's not with them because Walker doesn't just walk up the silo. But so Knox goes up to supply, which is on 120, so it's like 20 or so levels above where mechanical and all that. And it's on 110. They were greeted on the landing of 110 by frowns. McLean, the elder woman and head of supply, stood with her arms crossed over her yellow coveralls, her affect screaming unwelcome. What's this nonsense you're after? Knox glanced up and down the stairwell, shrugged his heavy load higher up his shoulder. Mind if we step in and talk about it? I don't want any trouble here, she said, her eyes blazing beneath her lowered brow. Let's go inside, Knox said. We haven't stopped once on the way up unless you want us collapsing out here. McLean seemed to consider this. Her arms loosened across her chest. She turned to 3 of her workers, who formed an imposing wall behind her, and nodded. While they pulled open the gleaming doors of supply, she turned and grabbed Knox's arm. Don't get comfortable, she told him. Inside the front room of supply, Knox found a small army of men and women in their yellow coveralls waiting. Most of them stood behind the low, long counter where the people of the silo normally waited for whatever parts they needed, whether newly fabricated or recently repaired. The parallel and deep aisles of shelves beyond ran into the gloomy distance, boxes and bins bulging off of them. The room was noticeably quiet. Usually, the mechanical thrumming and clanking sounds of fabrication could be heard worming their way through the space, or one might hear workers chatting unseen back in the stacks while they sorted newly fashioned bolts and nuts into hungry bins. Now it was just silence and distrustful glares. Knox stood with his people, their sacks and loads slumping exhaustedly to the floor, sweat on their brows, while the men and women of supply watched, unmoving. He had expected a more amicable welcome. Mechanical and supply had a long history together. They jointly ran the small mine beneath the lowest levels of mechanical that supplemented the silo's stockpile of ores. But now, as McLean followed her boys back inside, she graced Knox with a look of scorn he hadn't seen since his mother passed away. What in the hell is the meaning of this? She hissed at Knox. He was taken aback by the language, especially in front of his people. He thought of himself and McLean as equals, but now he was being snapped at as if by one of Supply's dogs. So yeah, we haven't actually seen inside Supply on the show or met anyone else from it. So I wonder, with them now expressly saying Carla's title, if that's about to change.
Yeah, maybe. And I wonder if, like, in the show, Supply's sort of been split in half. I wonder whether the guy in the wheelchair, whether his, because that sounds like kind of what was going on in the background of that scene as well, where they're fabricating stuff out of metal.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because they don't describe like they have like a metal workshop in here, but they are fabricating something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, supply plays a huge role in the book, so I hope we see more of them. But it is interesting also that so in this they're talking about how supply wears yellow coveralls. Um, they expressly say in this episode that miners wear yellow coveralls, so that's a change.
Yep.
And
Yep.
also the mines in the show sound like they're a much bigger operation than the books, because I was even wondering with the show later, Meadows says to Lucas, like, we need this metal. So that's why we need miners to get this metal. But I'm like, aren't you metal's like the most easy thing to recycle? Like, why do you keep needing new metal?
Well, I mean, I suppose over time you are going to need stuff because there's going to be. You're right, it is the easiest thing to recycle, but there is going to be an amount of it that you can't recycle.
Sure.
So I guess, like, particularly over like hundreds of years, that Silo
Uh-huh.
might have existed.
Yeah. Well, we know
No.
at least 140, right? Because that's when the
Yeah.
last. And it seems like was more rebellions before that. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like they're definitely making the mines a bigger thing on the show, and this whole idea of them being a punishment. So I guess but that did strike me later when she's like, "We need this metal." I'm like, "You have so much metal, just melt the metal down and make new things with it again."
Like, this is the thing. This is the thing. If and when we do see the mines, if they are anything less than hellacious, if they are anything less than like the grimmest possible gulag that you can think of, it's going to say, "Oh well, that's not so bad," because they
Yeah.
made such a huge thing of the mines.
To have them singing a sad song as they work in unison. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we did want the barbershop quartet, and it seems like the 3 players are still alive. And I'm still hoping we get this character called Rafe from the books, but he's one of those characters that's small enough. There's a good chance we won't get him.
Okay.
Okay, so Sims, Common, he accosts Bernard in the halls of IT with a barrage of questions. Is it true a gang from Mechanical is going to meet with Judge Meadows? Sims wants to use his raiders to stop them, but Bernard says they have to let them air their grievances. Maybe it will bring down the temperature. Rob is worried they might try for the airlock, which Bernard scoffs at, calling Martha and Carla "quote unquote" old ladies. But tells Sims he can station raiders above Judicial if that makes him feel better. Bernard doesn't want to be seen as the oppressor. I mean, I think. Do you think that's Meadows'
Yeah,
voice in his
I
head?
think that's Meadow. I think that's Bernard actually listening to Meadows.
Yeah. Let's
For a
take
change.
down the temperature. Yeah.
But by the way, I am you know, it hasn't happened yet, but I think my prediction that I made in the Comic-Con episode, the preview episode that we did, that one of Sims and Bernard was going to kill the other.
Mm.
I'm feeling more confident about that prediction after this episode. There's a lot of tension there.
Yeah. They're definitely not getting closer.
Yeah, and like we'll get to it in a bit,
Mhm.
but Sims is actively trying to work to undermine Bernard now.
Right. Well,
Or at the
yeah.
very least, he's got his own agenda.
Right. I mean, well, first of all, Sims he obviously has a jealousy of Meadows. That's what a lot of this is about. But also he's like just more reactionary, which is why he will never be Bernard Shadow. Like, come on.
Yeah, Sims, you're good at what you do. You are a
Uh-huh.
blunt instrument. You are a blunt instrument, mate. But
But
that is
Bernard's
what you
not
are.
handing you all the secrets of the silo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
But
you are an enforcer. That is what you are. That is what you do.
But it's also just like the way he uses. He knows that he can use Bernard as like a weapon to fire up the silo. Just the way that he can use Sims as a weapon to fire up the silo. Just the way Sims uses words like he's a gang from Mechanical. Like it's 4 people.
It's 4 people, including, as you know, Bernard points out, two
2
you
old
know
ladies.
two middle aged women. They're not going to make a dash for the yeah.
It just reminds me of, you hear the same thing on news in our world, like, oh, it's a caravan of people and like all this, like everybody calm down and let's just
Yeah.
take a beat here. No, the perceptions of groups is often about the adjectives that leaders choose to describe them. So, but then, the conversation in the hallway pivots, and we find out Sims is also worried that Meadows agreed to hear an appeal on the sentencing of one stargazing IT boy named Lucas Kyle, played by Avinash. So, yay! Fucking
Yay,
finally!
Lucas. Although, yay, Lucas, but also, Lucas.
Oh, Lucas. He is still arrested, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the real reason that Sims is quote unquote concerned about Meadows is that he's concerned that she's sliding into the job that he wants.
Yeah. Yeah. But also I think that from Sim's point of view, you know, she's a liberal squish. You know, she's too forgiving of all these people in Mechanical. She's too like you say, Sims is a reaction. You know, Sims is a reactionary.
How do you think he would handle that job? Being the shadow, finding out stuff.
That's an interesting question because it might it might just sort of like completely blow his mind. It might sort of completely change his view of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like Sims is not like Bernard's absolutely right. Like temperamentally, Sims is not the person you want to be head of IT.
Yeah. This week's spoiler cast is going to be about how different characters in the books did handle this job, what the job really entails, and it's kind of you already know, even if you're just watching the TV show, you do not want the wrong person in this position, especially considering they will one day take over as acting head of the silo, secret head of the silo.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I think Bernard is the wrong person in this position because
that's quite possible too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Sims is especially, you don't want someone who's that short-tempered and
yeah.
Yeah. Rob, he calls Bernard out for getting closer to Mary and asks Bernard to speak to her. And Yeah, when Bernard turns and looks at him and says, "You've been tracking that," I was like, "Oh shit, Sims.
Oh, you got caught.
Oh shit, this is not going well for you." And
Yeah, like I say, I would be very surprised if we get to the end of season 2 without one of them at least attempting to kill the other one.
yeah,
Like,
I
this is where
think
this is going.
I think if Sim's wife Camille, if she saw these interactions for herself, then she would not be pushing him. She would, I think she would be able to tell how dangerous it was getting, and Sims doesn't seem to realize.
Yeah, because this is the whole point of their marriage. He's the one with the power, but she's the one who's actually more intelligent. She's actually cleverer
Yeah.
than he is.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly more political than he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame that she's not the one in that position. She would be a much better shadow.
She would, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Bernard is more upset about these meetings that Meadows is having than he lets on to Sims. But Mary says it sends a better message to let citizens of the silo speak to their judge. Bernard disagrees. I don't know. I feel like she wants to have these meetings mostly out of curiosity, though, because she knows Bernard is lying. What do you think?
Yeah, and also I think we find out as well that she wants to have the meeting with Lucas because she wants to share some scientific knowledge.
Hmm.
You know, she wants to know exactly how much he knows.
Right, exactly. I
Yeah,
think she also just wants to be able to talk to someone, yeah. But I
yeah.
love, yeah, when Bernard's like, she's like, "Well, why don't you want me to meet with Lucas Kyle?" And he's like, "He's dangerous." And she's like, "He's dangerous. Well, now I really want to meet him."
What? Yeah,
I mean, yeah, Meadows is a girl after my own heart. I would die
yeah.
too. um, Meadows says, yeah, that if Meadows like shuts him down at this point, says if he wants her to take him seriously, he better bring that freaking cleaning suit. Do you think this is the conversation where he decided she had to die, or do you think it was not until the impeachment thing started?
I think it was not until the impeachment thing started.
Okay.
I mean, I can see an argument for both. Like, I can see it going both ways, but I think it's the impeachment thing.
Yeah.
He's probably got the idea at this point, but I don't think he's made his mind up.
No, yeah. He's getting worried for sure, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or maybe I mean, he clearly never intended to make that suit for her or to allow her to go out. So how long could he have kept that charade up?
I don't know. It's not like the suits. It depends how difficult the suits are to manufacture. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I guess he wouldn't want to tell people to do that because do we even know if the suits actually exist? Because if so, Solo doesn't seem to know about it because that's exactly what Juliet's looking for right now.
yeah. Oh, what you mean the emergency head of IT suit?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense. Why would the head of IT have their own suit? That doesn't make sense.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so Rob, he's talking to his wife Camille, Alexandria Riley, in their apartment, and Camille says that while she worked in judicial, people used to talk about how brilliant Judge Meadows was, but then something happened and she started drinking instead of thinking. And Rob has an idea to get Meadows out of the way. They just need to get her impeached. There are three possible grounds for impeaching a judge: proven misbehavior, incapacity to act, or endangering the silo. And even Camille's worrying that the impeachment could be destabilizing for the silo as a whole. But Rob says it could also unite the upper half. And he's going to ask other levels and heads of departments to align with him to make this happen, to stop the mechanical meeting if possible. Camille points out that even just the threat of impeachment will send a message to Bernard, and she hopes that it will push Bernard to sideline Meadows and turn back to her husband for counsel instead. So, yeah, uniting the upper half, part of this whole flawed idea that if the top is strong, they can crush the bottom. Still, still don't like that twist. But I mean, I guess in the real world, there are people who think that, aren't there? Who think like as long as all the people above a certain level are lock elbows, they can keep the proletariat down
Yeah,
and
but I mean, this is the thing. The silo is not the real world. Like,
mm,
everybody's roles are much more clearly defined, and
mhm.
it's a much more closed, much more controlled environment in the sense of, it has to be sort of environmentally controlled in order for people to live. So I don't think there's actually like much. I don't. There's only so far you can compare the silo to the real world because it's a totally different environment.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is where I think this episode was a little bit rushed because I am a sucker for a bit of courtroom drama,
Mm.
and I would have loved to have seen what the impeachment process was, what it looked like, because like what Sims is implying is there is some sort of quasi-parliamentary body with all the heads of department and all the heads of the different levels sort of coming
Mm-hmm.
together as a court. And I would just have loved to have seen that. Like I said, I'm a sucker for a bit of courtroom
Yeah.
drama.
I mean, yeah, no, I'm not surprised they didn't do that. And people already complain that this show is slow. Like some people do. That if people complain, that's what they complain about. So I can see why they didn't do that. And also from, this is a book reader perspective thing, but one of the reasons why book readers have been freaking out is because we have this powerful character, Meadows, who's emerging at the center of stuff and she's not from the book. So they're like, well, how does that affect everything else? So I can imagine from that perspective, they're like, okay, we threw this curveball at you, but now we get her out of the way so we can get back on track with the book story.
Yeah, but she's really good.
Yeah, I know. I really liked her. I'm sad to see her go, even though I'm like, okay, well, that yeah.
Yeah.
It had to happen in a way. It was like as soon as Bernard told her she was going to get the suit, it was like she's not surviving this season.
And also, like, I want to see the Silo law firm. You
Oh,
know, whatever it is, there is a pact. Therefore, there is a
there
pact.
must be lawyers to
There are
represent.
rules.
Yeah.
Therefore, there must be lawyers. I want to see. I want to see. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, this is only season 2. There's still time for
yeah,
it. um Yeah, I think though, just the fact that Sims thinks at this point that there is any chance he might get that job shows exactly how ill suited for the job he is.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like Rob, read between the lines.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
even read between. It's not even read between the lines. It's read the text.
I mean, so I just said I think Camille would be better than Rob at the job, and I agree. But would she also be too smart like Meadows? For Bernard, anyway.
Possibly.
No.
I mean, I think probably the ideal candidate is Billings, but
Hmm.
Billings has too much. I think Billings has too much of a moral core to do that job
Right.
well.
I think Bernard's probably starting to realize that too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so Billings confessed his syndrome to Meadows, and then now she's gone. He trusted someone he trusted Juliet, and then she's gone. He trusted Meadows, and then she's gone. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm. So speaking of Billings, meanwhile, while Team Mechanical Supply plans their trip up, Paul Billings, Chinaza Uche, departs for his trip down to the deep, responding to Hank's request for his presence after the lethal firebombing/shooting incident last week. His wife, played by Caitlin Zawes, is worried. She says there's a mob from Mechanical on their way up. And Paul offers to have a deputy stay with her, but she just wants Paul to stay. But duty calls. He thinks he can make a difference. So it's interesting how alike she and Sims sound when they talk about that mob. She calls it a mob. He calls it a gang. I think she is the type of person who listens to people like Sims, and that's maybe why I've never really liked her as a character. I mean, I
yeah.
think she's a well-drawn character. I just don't like her.
And also, there's something really like nicely domestic about it when she's going, "Have you got enough ginger?"
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just and like she's walking around with the baby as well, and it's
Right.
just something really touchingly domestic about the whole thing.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah,
she has something to fear for losing.
yeah, but yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, she's not. Yeah, she's just happy living her life, doing her thing, not really questioning authority, kind of thing.
Right. And if Sims says something, if Sims says people are bad, then those people must be bad. Paul is the voice of reason in their relationship, clearly. He's like, it's just a few people. The judge agreed, and I trust the judge. And then he says he'll ask somebody to stop by and we'll come back as soon as I can. But now, as soon as he said, I will come back as soon as I can, I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen that's going to prevent him from coming back?
It's like, yeah, don't say that. That's like saying it's going to be the best Christmas ever. Like, you've
Or I'm going to
doomed it.
retire in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
So once Billings reaches the Down Deep deputy station, Hank, Billy Postlethwaite, walks him through the whole incident with the firebomb. The shooter was Reggie Smalls, the retired raider we met last week, who says he was just doing as he was trained. Cooper lost his life trying to stop the firebomber, a guy no one recognized. So, yeah, doing as trained reminds me a lot about especially the police, situations and especially the US with shootings, but also about training videos for the police that have made the rounds that emphasize aggression.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said I wondered if Sims picked him because he knew he would be aggressive.
But I don't think he's like. I mean, I think that's an institutional aspect of the Raiders. Like, I don't get the sense he is any more trigger happy than any of the other Raiders.
Well, he had awards hanging on his wall
For
about being
marksmanship.
yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's trigger happy. But also that whole thing about him being left alone with someone for 5 minutes, maybe to beat him up.
Yeah.
It's suggests a certain extra aggressiveness.
And the question is he still in the Down Deep? Are we gonna? Yeah, is he still there?
Reggie
or...
Smalls, I imagine he probably went back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's when we get that exchange that you brought up earlier. Like, did they give a reason? No, when I asked, they just gave me that look, that judicial look. I used to be in judicial. Sorry. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, they've got resting judicial face.
Yeah, exactly. And so Hank then takes Paul to go see Cooper's body, but Judicial took the body. They said they wanted a body, and that was the only body there since the other body just disappeared in the middle of the night. And when Billings hears a description of the other body that disappeared, a guy about age 40 with a medium build, long hair, and a beard, he begins to wonder if it might be that same guy that Juliet arrested to save his life last season. So again, Billings is like the super detective, like almost supernatural ability. Like that is the most average description of someone you could give. He's like medium build. He's got like hair.
Yeah, he must be really. What was that? What was that game you used to play as a kid? It was like a board game, and you had a load of faces like
Was
lined
it
up.
Guess Who? Or?
Guess Who? Yeah.
Yeah.
Billings must be absolutely brilliant at Guess Who. Yeah.
He's like beard. Oh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I still want to know what they did with Cooper's body. This is a lingering question.
Well, yeah, that's kind of one of those things. I might want to know about what happened to Cooper's body. I might not. It depends on what actually happened. Like, I don't like the thought of Cooper being like, dismembered or something. Like,
yeah, why would they want to do that? I don't understand. I don't know. That's gotta come back.
Well, maybe the medical department, involuntary organ donor, maybe.
Maybe. Okay. So what they normally do is they bury the bodies in the fields to fertilize. So
yeah, because we saw that last season.
I mean, I guess they could remove the organs first, but
yeah.
Okay, speaking of involuntary fertilizer, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Mary Meadows' last day. So, in Mary Meadows' office, Lucas's appeal is not going well. Meadows points out that he's just saying yes, but to all the accusations, that he had his hands on the red level relic, that he slunk away when there was a raid on Juliet's apartment. She knows he doesn't think that his sentence, 10 years in the mines, is fair, but it's an important job, she says. Lucas asks why he was even granted the request for a review if she already had her mind made up, and she sends the two agents that are guarding him out of the room and asks him why he thinks she took the meeting. He says he assumes it was to see if he knew what was on the hard drive, but she says no, because we learn later she presumably already knows. And she starts to ask him what he knows about the lights in the sky he's so fond of staring at. He's figured out that the Earth is a rotating globe, and that's why the lights in the sky appear to move, and also why there is night and day. Meadows tells him the lights in the sky are called stars, and they are massive burning spheres of radiative gas. But he's right about the rotating Earth. It also revolves around the sun, which is also one of those stars, and there are billions of others. And Lucas is enthralled with this story. His face lights up, but as he starts to ask if there are other worlds out there like theirs, she calls the agents back in and she tells him, with them as witnesses, that for his cooperation, his sentence has been cut in half to 5 years in the mines. When Bernard later questions her about what he sees as leniency, she says someone like him wouldn't survive a year anyway. So clearly, yeah, she knows things about the nature of the universe. The people who know things always have access to that one room. We've seen it with Solo, we've seen it with Bernard, we've seen it with her now. I get the sense though that she called him in because she was just looking for someone else smart to talk to. Like she knows all this stuff she can't talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's such a nice thing because it's like Lucas, Renaissance man.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine like Copernicus and Da Vinci having like the
Yeah.
same conversation. It's yeah.
She's
And
like, yeah.
also, I think like Judge Meadows knew she had to send him to the mines, but wanted him to know that he was right. Wanted him to have that the comfort of that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't keep using your mind.
yeah,
But why did it felt kind of like he failed some test from her? Did you get that sense?
yeah, a little bit, but I'm not sure what the test was.
Yeah. So she cut his time in half. Do you think she told Bernard she expects him to die? Do you think she really meant that, or that was just something to get Bernard off her back?
No, I think unfortunately she really meant it. I mean, Lucas is not a fine physical specimen.
No,
He
I
is kind of
mean, not in that way. Not in the
no,
mining way. Yeah.
not in the kind of way you want to be hacking or out
Uh-huh.
of rock kind of way. So I think she's
And
probably right.
I mean, and mentally for him too, like he is someone who likes to sit at the top and stare beyond and wonder what's there, and then shoving him down in the deepest pit of the earth where his curiosity is just has nothing. There's nothing he can do with
Yeah,
it
there's
down there,
nothing for him to.
presumably.
Yeah, there's nothing for him to sort of grasp onto.
Yeah. I wonder if the miners have access to the digger room. I wonder if they know
Well,
about it.
we haven't seen them in there
No,
yet,
we
but they've
don't.
been.
We don't know anything about the miners. Um, So one thing I noticed, a motif throughout the episode is we see Meadows during the scene. She's rolling these worry balls in her hand. And then we see Sims tossing balls with his wife in their apartment. And then at another point, we see that Carla is using red and green balls to communicate with the Down Deep. It's just interesting. There's a lot of like these same shaped balls.
Yeah, and we have the apple falling in the credit sequence as
Right.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, it was especially this episode. Um, yeah, so we talked about the metal comes from the mines. They needed it. No one wants to work down there, so it's a punishment. I do think they should be recycling more, but okay. Miners, yeah, apparently in yellow coveralls, and in the book, like in the excerpt that I read above, yellow was supplies color. So I'm just curious. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter that they changed that. Just curious. Um, wasn't it also Juliet? She put on yellow coveralls in the other silo, didn't
Yeah,
she?
she did, but we don't know whether the color coding is the same in
No, it
both
must not
silos.
be because that was rather high up in the silo. That wouldn't be miners.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't.
Yeah. So as the agents drag Lucas away, Mary hears cries from outside her window to impeach her. And when she opens her blinds, she sees banners being flung over the railings of the staircase saying the same thing. Later, Bernard is not happy to see reports about this impeachment, but Mary suspects him as being the one behind her new troubles, although he truthfully says he is not. He says it was caused by public fear of the contingent from Mechanical marching up the stairs. So, yeah, that that those banners were like a really big fu in her face.
Yeah, they really were. And also, they were put together very quickly.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's easily enough done, but
Yeah.
So for anyone making a map, level 15 is judicial. Please share your mapping with us. But it is like, yeah, it's literally like 4 people from mechanical, and one's not even from mechanical, she's from supply. And if people were not making this political, no one would even notice 4 people walking up the stairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, all they want is to build better suits and to send a few people to explore outside Meadows, she points out to Bernard. And it sounds a lot like what Mary wanted for herself. You know, she's like, I just want to put on a suit and explore outside. That's all I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if Bernard was afraid she might say yes to them, although she merely says she was going to form a committee to explore the idea, which, Bernard points out is killing it with bureaucracy. And I do think she would have done that, but I wonder if part of him is like, oh, that's what she wants for herself. What if she encourages it?
Maybe, but I was also a bit disappointed in Bernard at this point because, like, that is the inevitable consequence of the speech he made. Like, of course, people are going to demand that if you've got this new whiz bang tape,
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to use it. Like, what did you think was going to happen? This is, if it hadn't come from mechanical, it would surely have come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
it's just the logical consequence of what you've created this situation, Bernard, and he seems like oblivious to that fact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think he's smart with like hacking and numbers and, logic and things like that, but Meadows has more wisdom when it comes to how the mind works, how people work.
Yeah, like he's blinkered.
Mhm.
He's got a path that he has to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But Bernard, he apologizes to her for the impeachment stuff going on. Mary says she doesn't care, though. She plans to be long gone on her secret little walk before that happens. So Bernard invites her over for dinner. There's a goofy vibe between them, like oh, we might hook up that night. So I think that's what they were setting up for the audience to think. But he promises her that her suit will be there as well. He says, "Come for dinner at 7, and the suit will be brought up at 9." And then she walks out, and Bernard takes out his key fob and stares at it. So we now know that the key on there unlocks the server room, but he's staring at like the keychain part of it that we've seen before light up and buzz.
Yeah.
Um, uh, what do you think he was waiting for, or making him think about something?
I'm
Or
not sure. I hope we find out in future episodes.
yeah, they
But yeah,
pointedly showed that.
that they seem to go out of their way to show him doing that, so it's clearly got
Mhm.
some significance.
Yeah, definitely. Um, So the dinner itself, okay, I'm gonna recap the entire series of events through the tragedy, and then we're gonna talk about it.
Okay.
So Bernard has prepared chicken and mushrooms for dinner while he plays the music of late 19th, early 20th century French composer Eric Satie, which he knows is a favorite of Mary's. He teases her about a race she ran once long ago, and the conversation about the good old days is warm and pleasant until Mary asks about the suit he promised her, and she realizes it isn't coming. She starts to realize that he's actually poisoned her. He didn't put it in the wine because he wasn't sure she would drink it, having recently allegedly given up alcohol and all. So it was in the mushrooms. He tells her she has minutes rather than hours left to live, but her death will reunite the silo, against mechanical, of course. She asks about the hard drive Juliet had, which Bernard reiterates that he destroyed, asking what was on it. She says that even if he knew, he couldn't do anything about it. But she tells him it had something to do with someone called Salvador Quinn, who was head of IT 140 years ago during the rebellion. He wrote a letter then, part of it was in code, and Mary seems to have deciphered that code, but she says she can't tell Bernard what was in it. This has to do with why Mary stepped down as Bernard's shadow 25 years ago after vanishing for 4 days. She told him then she didn't want to be tethered to him for the rest of her life, but she says now that that was not true. It seems there was at least some emotional connection between them the whole time, but she knew he could never give himself fully to her because of his job. She asks if she can go to the cafeteria one last time to see the outside, but Bernard can't let that happen. There might not be enough time. She could be a loose cannon, and he doesn't want her to die in public, of course, but he has something even better. He brings out a VR headset video from Costa Rica's Monteverde cloud forest, taken in 2018. And Bernard clearly knows the program well, and he tells her where to look for the best animal spottings as it runs. After it's over, Meadows asks, "What did they do, Bernard? How did they lose this world?" And she slumps into his arms. So, Luke, reactions.
Okay, the first thing I thought about watching the scene is, did you watch the show Hannibal?
No, I need to.
Okay. Like whoever was doing the director clearly liked the show Hannibal, because when you do the little, like, obviously it's Hannibal Lecter, so cooking and food are a big part of the show, and the whole thing with like Tim Robbins preparing the chicken and mushrooms with the classical music playing in the background, and he's even got his little copper Fatu saucepan
Hmm?
going, so Bernard is a bit of a foodie. And it really put me in mind of the show Hannibal.
You know what that reminded me of is it reminded me of Solomon from Beacon 23.
Yes, yeah, it did. But like for Hannibal, all that was missing was the Goldberg variations. Like they chose a different piece of music, but all that was missing was the Goldberg variations. I love the little back and forth about the race between Meadows and Bernard.
Hmm.
Because that is the conversation you get of two people who've known each other and have been fond of each other for a very long time, and then you get this wonderful throwaway line. Well, thank you for a not entirely terrible evening. And it's like, oh, but also like when Meadows figures out she's been poisoned, like her reaction is kind of telling, because her first instinct is not to lunge, after Bernard
Right.
with a knife. It's to ask him why. It's to try and figure out what's going on. Small point, but when he says it's in the mushrooms, did he mean he'd poisoned the mushrooms, or did he mean he'd given it a poisonous variety of mushroom?
Oh, good question. Good question. I'm not sure, actually. I had assumed that he had just like cooked something into the mushrooms, but it might have been that the mushrooms themselves were poisonous. But why would those exist in the silo? I don't know. Maybe for this purpose?
Well, anyway, it's not
Yeah.
a big deal, but
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting when he was doing the description of the VR headset. Bernard not only knew what all the animals were, but he knew he knew their names.
Mm-hmm.
He knew how you could tell male from female. For the birds, so the depth and breadth of Bernard's knowledge is wider and deeper. I think thought it probably was. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one thing that the scene illustrates.
I mean, this hurt Bernard, right? Like,
Oh yeah, like deeply, and like the look, like Tim Robbins is sort of, he does a really good job of showing that this hurts Bernard deeply, but also that that's not going to stop him from doing what he feels he needs to do.
oh yeah,
Like
definitely.
he is sad about this, but his conscience is okay with it in the end.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, it really hurt him, and like what we were saying what I was saying in episode 3 about maybe they had a one night stand. No. This was a serious relationship.
Hmm.
They were, I think, because we've said before we don't really know anything about Bernard. Well, we know this
Mm-hmm.
now. We know that he loved Mary Meadows and that she loved him back.
Yeah. We
And
don't know if
again, that
they went for it actually, but there was obviously feelings there. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean that's really important for a character like Bernard because it makes him 3-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. But then he still killed her. So
But then he
yeah.
still killed her. Yeah.
Because his first duty is to the silo, and he
Well,
thought
his
that,
first duty is to the Order. Actually, it's not.
well, to the silo via the order. Um. So yeah, I thought it was such a shame, especially because it was after this like lovely dinner. So we know they don't let the plebs read books like The Wizard of Oz because Juliet and Solo had that conversation about books. I'm guessing this music that we've been hearing from our world is also forbidden. Like, what do you think other people listen to while they have dinner in their apartments?
Well, we know from like Freedom Day in season 1 that there's a lot of like homemade music and homemade instruments. So I'm not necessarily sure they listen to anything because I'm not sure they have the technology to actually record
Right, that's true.
to actually record music.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's clearly a lot of homemade music in the silo,
Mm-hmm.
lot of sort of quasi skiffle. Um,
Skiffle.
yeah, it's sort of, which is yeah, it's sort of country music, sort of made with homemade
Okay.
sort of instruments.
Okay. All right. So who would you let pick the music for your silo seclusion? Solo or Holland and Meadows?
That's a difficult choice.
For me, it's an easy one.
I think I might go with Bernard Meadows.
Hmm.
I refuse to use Bernard's surname because, like, nobody else ever does.
I know. Why don't they? They gave him one. He doesn't have one in the books, actually. He's just
Okay.
called Bernard the whole time. Um, okay. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely go with Solo's pick. So far, he's 2 for 2 with me.
Okay.
But it seems like Meadows did have something to do with that hard drive being out and about in the world. But if Bernard doesn't know what's on it, where did it come from? How is it that there's a hard drive that she knows its contents and Bernard does not?
Well,
I mean,
maybe that goes back to the fact that she is fundamentally intellectually curious and Bernard
mm,
isn't. Like,
right.
if the order tells Bernard he's not meant to know something, then he doesn't want to know it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think one of the purposes of the whole scene with Lucas is to flag that if there is a mystery, she will try and solve it. If there's
Right.
something she doesn't understand, she will try and understand it. And
Yeah.
it's not even a choice. It's a fundamental character trait. It's who she is.
Do you think that that applies to Lucas as well, given their
Yeah,
conversation?
I think it probably does.
Even though he told Bernard last season when he got arrested, he's like, "I'm not curious. I'm just." What did he say? I don't know. I forget.
Yeah,
But he's trying to. Lucas knows he needs to play down his curiosity to
yeah.
protect himself.
Whereas I'm not sure Meadows could, even if she wanted to.
I mean, she was bossing Bernard around. I'm like, that's not going to go well.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes more sense given they have obviously a history, but yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but again, like the hard drive, he destroyed Meadows without getting all the information first. So we still don't know what happened 25 years ago that made her quit. We now know she vanished for 4 days, but we don't know where she went or what she did there. And we don't know why she can't tell Bernard what was in Salvador Quinn's letter. Yeah. So Salvador Quinn, not in the book. There was the head of IT in the book during that previous rebellion, which is 135 years before. The head of IT was a man named Mr. Wick. And Mr. Wick, his name rhymes with Dick for a reason, because he actually does intentionally try to start a mini war in the hopes of preventing a bigger one. But he sets it up to blame the porters. Um, which ends up almost getting a character that Abby and I both love killed on his birthday after insulting him and his mom, like Mr. Wick, which is awful. But yeah, Mr. Wick sucked hard. But yeah, so
Okay,
they've
I'm just
changed that. So presumably they're changing. They've added a whole new story with the Salvador Quinn and the letter, and so I don't know
okay.
what any of that stuff is.
I'm just imagining Keanu Reeves now.
As
Mr. Wick.
why would Keanu Reeves?
'Cause
Keanu Reeves is so nice. Why would he be Mr. Wick the Dick?
John Wick.
Oh, got it, got it.
Yeah,
Okay, but
yeah.
this one, maybe it's even Wyke. It's
Oh
WYCK.
yeah, YK is White.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, Mr. Wyke. Yeah, but it's the other one rhymes, so it's better.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm. By the way, I'm doubling down on my prediction that Danny is currently busy trying to get stuff off of that hard drive disk.
Well, if he wasn't, he's probably going to be.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I presume when, Sims went to Patrick and said, like, we want you to do this firebomb thing, that Bernard went to Danny and said, you got to do this disc thing.
Yeah.
Um, I was in the Monteverde Cloud Forest in 2019, so a year after this VR video was taken. And I have to say, this is an unbelievable collection of animals to be captured at one time. Like, for
Okay,
example,
you don't see that many animals.
I mean, obviously, they hide from people, so maybe if you go the right time of day, there'll be more outs, but they're not just all gathered in one spot where you just look around. Like that Quetzal bird, he mentions, yeah, there were people when I was in Costa Rica, people were like searching long and hard to see one Quetzal bird, and that's considered an achievement if you see one. And he's like, "Look up, there's a flock of them." Like, okay.
No, there were two. There wasn't a whole flock. There were just two.
He said a flock.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah. He said that the males had two. He said, "Look, those two are
Oh,
males
yeah.
because they have
Oh,
the long feathers." Yeah,
sorry. Yeah.
yeah. Another thing I wanted to point out here is that Bernard asks Meadows if she ever tried out the VR headset when she, quote unquote, sat with the legacy. And so this legacy, it's with a capital L in the subtitles, and it's a new word for the TV show. Do you have any thoughts on what it might mean?
No, to be honest, I was too caught up in the drama of Meadows dying to pay too much attention to that. But yeah, that's interesting.
So just saying, pay attention to that word legacy. We did talk about it in the spoiler cast a couple weeks ago for those who want those spoilers, though they are handling it differently in the show, it seems like everything else. So, and then after this is all done, Sim shows up with a knife and a body bag, and Bernard tells him to do exactly as he instructs. And Bernard puts back on his suit jacket, by the way, to let Sims in. So I think that's like a signal that Bernard was letting himself, be more himself with Meadows. And now that Sims is back, he's like, "Oh, back to business,
Yeah,
Bernard."
the armor is back on. Yeah.
Hmm. What do you think Sims thinks, seeing what Bernard is willing to do to an alleged ally and potential shadow?
Well, yeah. I mean, again, like I just can't see either. Like I said, I wouldn't want to put money on which way it goes,
Hmm.
but I can't see Sims and Bernard making it through
But
this
do you think,
season.
because Sims has seemed somewhat oblivious to this point where he doesn't realize that he's making things worse, but you think he's starting to realize that his life could be in danger as well?
I think he's getting there, yeah. And if he doesn't get there, then the family Sims will sort of collectively
Right.
realize it. I think.
Hmm. All right. Well, we'll get back in a minute to what exactly Bernard instructed Sims to do, but let's first set up people walking into this trap. So while all this is playing out elsewhere, unbeknownst to them, of course, Knox, Shirley, Carla, and Martha are on their journey up to see the judge. And Carla has brought green and red colored balls so they can throw them down through the center of the stairwell to communicate quickly with the down deep. Red means turn the power off, green means you can turn it back on. And Teddy Olatunji Ofe, the graffiti artist who got arrested last week and has a busted up face now to show for it, he was left behind over his protestations to be the one who waits for the balls to drop and pass on that intel. Carla volunteered to be the one to stay behind so Teddy could go, but ultimately Carla couldn't let Martha do this without her. Um, so to point out, I like that they've mentioned now, like when Martha went to see Carla last season, we heard dogs and the barking in the background. Now Carla mentions that her dogs were mad that she took their
Yeah.
balls. So yeah, dogs are very linked to Supply in the books because they are the guard dogs.
Okay.
So I like those dog references. Okay, so on the way up, Team Mechanical pauses to catch their breath in a park, and Martha and Carla have a heart to heart. Martha says she realizes she's wasted too much of her life and she can't remember any good reason for them not to be together. So, you think we're going to get a flashback to what happened between them 25 years ago, aka the same time Mary stopped being Bernard's shadow?
I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope so.
Are you getting worried that this whole conversation kind of echoed Marnes and Johns' walk down the sun?
It does. Yeah, like couples don't do well in this show.
Mm.
Yeah. And like
It
obviously if somebody's gonna die, it's gonna be Carla. Like um I think Martha has got pretty good plot armor at this point.
Hmm. I do like that, we've been bitching a lot about the disappearing agoraphobia, but I do like that Carla calls her out. She's like, "You didn't come out of your hole for 25 years. Now you're out all the time."
Yeah, but we've talked about that. I don't
Yeah.
feel the need to
Yeah, I
labour the
just like
point.
that she calls her out on it. So the writers are at least somewhat aware. So, and then meanwhile, while they're having this talk, Knox and Shirley are chatting on another bench, and Knox asks Shirley if she would volunteer to be one of the people to go outside and look around if Judge Meadows agrees to this request. And she says, in a heartbeat. And Knox says he would too. He wants to look for Juliet. The not knowing is killing him. Juliet might have annoyed him, but she was someone he could count on. So, Luke, would you want to be one of the explorers if you were in their position?
Yeah, definitely. And I also think Knox says something. What would you want to see at the distance?
Yeah.
Which again, I think it's one of those nice sort of reminders that this is a group of people living in a deeply unnatural environment. Like
Mm-hmm.
the conversation between Meadows and Billings
Yeah.
last episode. And
Yeah.
like the way Knox says it, there's like real longing in his voice. So I thought that was really well done. I love these parks, by the way. I want to go and hang out in one of these parks. They look
Yeah.
really inviting. Yeah.
Except for the lack of sunlight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, while they're in this park, though, two faces we know from last season show up. Molly Carnes, Angela Yo, and Sandy Chipo Chung. They said they were there to help escort them up to safety as requested by Sheriff Billings because the upper people might be throwing shit, like literally throwing shit. But Molly and Sandy will leave them a couple of levels below judicial so that people don't think they've chosen sides. After all, Sandy points out she is a civilian. So, yeah, so we saw Deputy Carnes last season in several operations, like the one in which Juliet planted the Pez dispenser. And Carnes was also the one forced to throw appliances at Juliet when she was in the recycling shaft at the end of the season. But I'm not sure which deputy station is her home because she was kind of all over the place last season.
Yeah. No,
She just kept showing up.
I think she's based wherever the plot needs her to be.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I did like Walker's thing. Oh, so you're gonna leave us alone then? Just when it
Yeah.
gets dangerous.
And they're like, yes.
Thanks.
And yeah, Sandy still has the snark. She was the former up top sheriff's assistant who butted heads with Juliet before making amends and moving down to 105 to be closer to her family. So we haven't seen her since episode 5 of the first season, but she's the one that Juliet tells, like, oh yeah, down deep we eat babies and each other.
Yeah.
We know she is stationed in 105, which is like the lower mids, almost the down deep. That's probably around where they have stopped. Do you think that these two are eventually going to be forced to choose sides?
Everybody is eventually, I think.
Which side do you think these two will choose? Do you think they'll choose the same side?
No, not necessarily. Also, I'd like to have seen in this scene like all four of the down deepers like take a minute to just look at the greenery because like they don't see
Gardens like that?
gardens very often. Like
Yeah.
this should have been a bigger moment, I think.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so that brings us to the final act, which first we get Billings radioing Deputy Molly Cairns. I guess she's already peeled off from her escort duty. And Billings asks her about the men she arrested who were helping Juliet in the season 1 finale. And she says, yes, they were Danny Bly and Patrick Kennedy. And why, yes, as Billings suspected, Patrick Kennedy does match the description of the missing body of the firebomber. And Billings and Hank are realizing together that Patrick Kennedy, who was shot in the shoulder rather than the chest, might not be as dead as they thought he was. So she says, judicial took them hard, gagged him and bagged him. Like, oh, we saw that. That looked bad.
Yeah, that looked painful. That looked deeply unpleasant.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we're sad to lose Mary this episode, but are we glad to get Patrick back?
Well, like I said earlier, I'm not sure that we have got Patrick back. So until we see him on screen, I'm still saying dead.
I need one more joke for him. I need him to maybe get that watch. Even though he's not the one who has the watch in the books.
But presumably he's going to be medicated out of his gourd, so... Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's what we'll see him like in the room next to Gloria in that long-term care center or something.
Yeah.
So Knox, Shirley, Martha, and Carla, they have reached level 15, where raiders are holding back a mob of protesters armed with pipes and other loose objects and blocking the way to Judicial, threatening our team from the down deep. So Carla throws a red ball over the railing of the stairs and it falls to the bottom where Teddy sees it and tells the team down there to turn off the power. So first of all, those balls could have killed someone down there the way it was ricocheting around.
I'm gonna say, like, Teddy's got great. It's a good job. Teddy has like really good reflexes. Because he
Yeah.
could have been completely brained by that ball, or somebody else could have.
I mean, it went ricocheting around. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Knox said, he said before in a previous episode, they could only pull this turning off the power thing once. But this is not the shot that we saw in the trailer of the rolling blackout up the silo.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. And they're not properly like shutting down the generator. They're just flipping a switch.
Is there a difference? I don't know. Did
Well,
they turn off like the servers?
There is a difference in the sense that they can obviously easily turn it back on, off, and then back on again. Whereas if they really wanted to shut the silo down, they'd have to shut the generator down, and I think that's what Knox is referring to when he says they can only do it once.
Didn't they say something last season about like they could only shut it down for so long because the hot water that's spurting up?
Yeah, something like that.
So I'm like, how long could they actually keep the power out? Not just for that, but also presumably there's like air filtration systems or something running in the silo, and they might all die of carbon
monoxide poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
Well. Yeah, I just want somebody in mechanical to do that thing where you flip the switch really quickly to turn the lights on and off to get somebody's attention.
And then the entire silo goes.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah, I have questions, but okay. So Bernard comes out with the lights off and says that Judge Meadows isn't feeling well, understatement, but he'll get them in to see her if they turn the lights back on. So Carla throws down a green ball and the lights go back on, and Knox and Shirley are escorted through the crowd into the judge's office, but Martha and Carla are told to stay behind. Inside the judge's office, they find Sims standing over Meadows' body, which is slumped in her chair with a knife through her chest. They realize that this was a setup and that the murder is going to be pinned on them. They know it looks bad, but they have no choice but to run, and Bernard encourages them to do it. Bernard tells Sims not to involve his raiders because the people of the silo have to take care of this themselves. He's going to set the mob on Knox and Shirley, but he hasn't yet. And Knox points out that they have to keep their cool until they get through the crowd, as the crowd does not yet know about the death. Once they get back to Walker and McLean, though, they fucking run. Bernard gives him a couple minutes to get out, then sends Sims out to tell the crowd their mechanical murdered Meadows story and metaphorically light the mob's torches and hand them pitchforks. So Bernard telling Martha and Carla to stay behind, do you think he was protecting them in a way so that they didn't get the murder accusations too?
No, because when the mob catches up with them, I don't think the mob are going to be too particular about separating them.
Why tell those two to stay behind?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe Martha is, maybe they are more useful with Martha's engineering skills and Carla's knowledge of supply.
Or maybe he has a soft spot for old ladies.
Yeah, and I think also Knox and Shirley just make more plausible murderers than. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, because Martha and Carla are more even-tempered.
Yeah.
I noticed as they were walking in, and actually the AD, the audio description points us out as Knox and Shirley are walking through the halls in like Judicial. Knox seems impressed by the overhead fluorescent lighting, so I guess you don't see that office lighting down in the down deep.
No. And I did think like Knox has like great presence of mind in the moments. He don't run. Walk. I thought that was pretty sharp of him.
But first, I would have expected Shirley to be the one to want to punch Sims in the face, but she actually holds Knox back from doing it, which I agree. It would have only made it worse. There's nothing that would have done.
Yeah.
Then Sims could be like, see, they punched me in the face too.
Although Sims really does need to be punched in the face.
Yes. when we say Bernard is the end of the morality scale, that doesn't mean that Sims is far off.
No.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, Sims has killed people too, just not like it would be Bernard killing Mary is more akin to like Sims killing his own wife, which is never going to happen.
Never gonna happen.
Yeah. Bernard tells Sims that the move to impeach Meadows was unexpected and forced his hand. And he says, I believe good will come of it still. I know you were behind it, Rob. So, and then he dismisses him. And I feel like Sims is realizing at this point, like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. But he's like, don't let them get too much of a head start. You wouldn't want to lose them, which also sounded like a threat to me. I think
Yeah.
Sims should be fearing for his life now.
Yeah, definitely. Which is not to say that I think that Sims is doomed. I could easily see a situation where Sims gets his revenge in first, to put it that way.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying anything to that effect, just that like Sims maybe is finally starting to realize that he's been handling things the wrong way with
Yeah.
Bernard and he's getting on his bad side instead of
Yeah.
back in, the position he hopes for.
Yeah.
So, outside on the landing, Sims tells the crowd he knows they didn't like Meadows agreeing to meet with the Down Deepers, but she believed every citizen deserved a hearing. But, he says, those animals from Mechanical betrayed that goodwill with murder, killing her when she refused to let them open the airlock that protects the people of the silo from the wasteland outside. He says it is now the duty of every citizen to find those murderers and bring them to justice. And the crowd chases the crew from Mechanical as they chant, Justice, 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 which is a little on the nose, but that's fine.
But also, somebody has to do like a YouTube video of that scene with the music from the Benny Hill show playing over the top of
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer when we see like the behind the scenes more subtle machinations like Bernard killing Meadows and stuff. And I wish like they're just making Sims like just to have someone from authority doing that stuff. That's what's bugging me a little bit about the
Yeah,
realism.
it felt a little bit on the nose. And like I realized, and the show's done a good job of setting this up, I realized there was a lot of latent prejudice towards Mechanical. But it seemed like the jump from prejudice to violence happened too quickly. And also, like, it nobody has brought up the fact that in Silo time, in Showtime, the mayor and the judge have died under mysterious circumstances. Very closely together, a matter of months apart. Nobody seems to be asking that question.
Well, maybe they distracted them sufficiently with everything else that's happened since.
Yeah, but it seems like somebody should be saying, like, all the people in authority in this silo seem to be dying all of a sudden.
But you know what? Like, I am often shocked in real life when, things are very clearly happening like, oh, everyone who questions this one person is immediately fired and nobody's asking questions about this. But no, they just elect that person again. Just not to name any specific examples, but but that's people shock me in real life with how deeply they will bury their head in the sand if they think that they have an easier answer, an easier target to place the blame on.
Yeah, but it is actually still quite difficult to get people to take that next step from I don't like you to I'm going to be violent towards you. That actually takes some time.
I used to think that more, but these days I see so many examples of where that is happening all over the world right now. So I think it's incredibly depressingly easy to get people to take that step.
Yeah.
Well,
but also, what do we think's going to happen? Because there's no way the four from Mechanical make it all the way down to back to Mechanical before the mob catches them. Like,
well, they'll have to pull a Juliet and find a way to hide and move secretly.
Yeah, or unless there's like a bunch of people from Mechanical coming up, meeting them halfway.
Yeah, I don't know. And then what, the fight starts there, or
Yeah,
they have to do a barricade or something? I don't know. I was gonna say though that yeah, I do think that the way they've mixed in the truth with the lies and what Sim says does tend to make the lies more powerful.
it
So for
does.
instance,
It does.
Meadows did say the bit about everyone deserving a hearing. That is something she said before she died. And technically, the four of them did want to open the airlock. They wanted to do it to conduct experiments, but even if they got the chance to explain that, the nuance would be completely lost in the fearful mob. They're like,
Yeah, it's
not
true.
to
It
kill
would.
you, but to investigate. And they're like, no, killing us.
But I mean, you're absolutely right. It would. But I don't. I think it bears repeating that Bernard set this up.
No, yeah, uh-huh.
If you've got the good tape, why wouldn't you use it?
Because yeah, they don't want them to explore beyond the bowl. What if they wander over to another silo that's not dead?
Yeah.
We're collecting martyrs now. We've not, you mentioned the ones from last season, but now we've got Juliet. Meadows is a martyr for the silo. Do we think? I worry about Knox and Shirley, especially making it back down. Maybe Martha and Carla get a pass because they didn't go in there.
Oh well, I think we haven't seen this yet, but there is a shot in the trailer of like Knox and Shirley marching through IT like weapons in hand.
Mm,
That must come from somewhere later on in the season.
hmm
So I'm not saying they survive the season, but I think they'll get through the next few episodes. Okay.
yeah, I do love how when they when they came out, Shirley says, "Quick, don't look scared," and Carla's like, "I wasn't until you said that." Like weird. They had no idea what happened. They're like, "What? Things aren't normal? Why are people chasing us?" Oh. All right. Any final thoughts on the episode or hopes for what comes next?
I think this this episode of Silo is the first time I've watched an episode of Silo in season 1 or season 2 and come away with such mixed feelings.
Hmm.
Like there is stuff in it I really like, but
Okay.
there's stuff but I did feel like we're getting to the whole plot with Mechanical is being a little bit rushed.
Hmm.
And I'd have liked to have seen a bit more of a slow burn of
Hmm.
this kind of tension between the up top and the down deep.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it kind of reminded me of, and this is an odd comparison. Kind of reminded me of why I'm not a big fan of Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
Because my problem with Revenge of the Sith is like the turn Anakin takes to the dark side happens too quickly and too completely. And like the interesting part of that movie is when he's hanging on the edge of violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's more story that you could tell.
Well, they have. It's called the Clone Wars. Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I'm talking about Silo now. There's more story
Yeah.
that
Okay.
you could tell about this tension between the down deep and the up top before it has to turn violent. It felt like a sort of fork in the road that we got to too early.
Hmm. Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's not to say I didn't like the episode. There were things in there that I really did like, but I came away with quite mixed feelings overall.
Okay. I mean, I would say for me, I think this is my favorite episode so far, but it is also at the same time the episode I have the most frustrations with, which I've outlined in detail. I won't go back into them, which are similar to your own. Um, but I still think that this storytelling wise, this is the best episode. I'm not some yeah, some of the logic of the way, but it's like, you know what? I just have to say, okay, so the order says in this version of the story, the order says that you always blame it on Mechanical. And of course, Bernard is going to be someone who follows the order. So that's that. And I'm just like Martha and her agoraphobia. I'm just going to let it go for now, I think. We'll see how I feel next episode.
You're a better person. You're a better person than me because I'm not going to go through it again. But I think that genuinely did put me in quite a sort of negative frame of mind for the
Mm.
rest of the episode. I think.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, for me, the rest of the episode was so good that it overrides my
Yeah.
objection to that side of things. And I'm just
Okay.
choosing to turn my brain off about trying to make out, because you know what? It's not necessarily supposed to make sense logically, because we keep pointing out people are not logical.
Yeah, and I mean,
People.
also, there is more information out there that may make this make more
Yeah.
sense.
All right, so we're going to put a pin in that discussion. But yeah, Bernard clearly back to square one with this whole shadow business. So we're going to be talking about that more in this week's spoiler cast, as I said, about what it means to be in that role as the shadow of the head of IT, and where we think that story of Bernard seeking his shadow will go from here, now that he seems to be down two options. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that's everything I wanted
Okay.
to say.
Well, we'll be back here every Friday through January 17th, breaking down each episode with more mailbags in between. And we also want to hear your thoughts on the show and your theories for what's happening. We will discuss these, pose them to the rest of the community in separate mailbag episodes this season, which we'll be doing every episode or two, depending on how we can schedule it. So send your emails to woolshiftdustpodcast@gmail.com. You'll find that link in the show notes, as well as a link to the Lorehounds Discord, which has a dedicated forum with separate chats per episode and a book spoiler chat. And by the way, book spoilers are welcome in your feedback. Just make sure you send them to me, not Luke, or the We'll Shift Us podcast. That's fine. But then, yeah, any book spoiler feedback will, of course, be discussed in the spoiler cast rather than the public episodes. The spoiler cast episodes are available to Supercast and Patreon subscribers, and you will also find their breakdowns of the Silo books and short stories, and a season one spoilery rewatch episodes, extra interviews with Hugh Howey with full book spoilers, and of course these ongoing weekly spoiler casts. And I would like to welcome new Silazins, Rupesh K, Michael S, David B, and welcome back Ron A. And I'd also especially like to welcome new Stories in Sarah, LCB, and Nathan T. So Stories ins, Silos ins are that's the Patreon level that you get, and there's also a Silos in level on Supercast, which is the one of the two that I recommend, by the way, especially since Patreon's doing some weird pricing stuff at the moment. But Stories-ins are Silas-ins who are also Canon Padawan subscribers. So the Canon Padawan feed is for the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast feed. That's where you get extras for that. You can find a link in the show notes where you can see what all the options are, including new season pass options, which allow you to just get the Silo episodes, either just the book episodes or just the spoiler casts, or both together in a discounted combo. So again, explore the links in the show notes if you are curious about that. Subscribers, of course, get all the season pass stuff plus the additional episodes, like additional Hugh Howey book and story breakdowns. Dune book breakdowns are coming after Silo, and Luke and I are working on our holiday special, and there's some more from previous years in there as well.
Yes.
Previous holidays in there as well. If you enjoyed this episode, though, and you want to help us out, you don't need to be a subscriber if you don't want this extra stuff. Just word of mouth, passing this on to anyone else you think might be interested, leaving a positive review wherever you're listening. These are small things that help us enormously. And just thank you for listening in general, whether or not you're a subscriber, whether or not you do any extra steps to help us. We just appreciate you being along on this journey with us.
Yes, we did.
So in the meantime, now we're recording this a couple weeks ahead of time, so I'll keep this brief because who knows, we'll be in a couple weeks. But David's definitely breaking down on the Lorehounds with me. Dune Prophecy, the weekly episodes as they release. Lots of other stuff happening on the Lorehounds feed as well. There should be a Wicked one shot coming out probably shortly after this, along with some comics versus content in the works. This will drop the day after the Creature Commandos new animated DCU series starts, so check that out. I mentioned the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast. Also, Properly Howard on the network has started a new season called A Few Good Films, where they did a draft where they're going to watch one film for each of the A Few Good Men stars. So it's a film festival of other films made by the stars from A Few Good Men. Ramblers Rising is the current radioactive ramblings coverage of Red Rising. Plus, they're doing Ghibli plus Arcane. And of course, check out Nevermind the Music for psychology meets music. You'll listen to music in new ways, I promise. And it could be said on hiatus, but full of content that you can explore, right, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, we're on hiatus for a bit because between recording all of these podcasts with Elysia and marking a load of essays, and also my co-host Simon works in public affairs, and Christmas is like his busiest time of the year. So we will be back between Christmas and New Year to do our review of the year. I think
Okay.
that's the next episode we've got scheduled.
Okay, cool. Well, in the meantime, we will see you all next Friday for episode 5. And of course, any mailbag or spoiler cast episodes in the meantime. Until then, don't eat any mushrooms Bernard feeds you.